Ms. Schmitz, Dr. Goodpaster, Deacon Reinhardt, members of the faculty and staff, parents, friends, benefactors, guests, and family members. On behalf of the class of 2019, I would like to thank you for joining us today as we celebrate the end of a long journey and look ahead towards the beginning of a new one. This day would not be possible without the support and commitment of everyone in this room. Our teachers, who have guided us through our most challenging endeavors, our friends, who have been a constant source of joy and companionship, and lastly, our families, who have given us the freedom to become the unique individuals sitting before you today. In preparation of this new journey, which my classmates and I will begin in a few months, I've been taking the time to look back on all those life-changing moments, irreplaceable relationships, and lifelong influences responsible for developing me into the person I am today. As almost all of my classmates know, the works of C.S. Lewis have been my constant companions all throughout my life. The Chronicles of Narnia have shaped me from the very beginnings of my childhood. As a child, I found these stories captivating. Although my taste in C.S. Lewis's work has expanded to include his numerous works of philosophy and theology, even now as an 18-year-old, I still find myself returning to the comfort of these stories to find his hidden gems and beautiful allegories as I reread his words for the countless time. The character whom I've always admired the most in these stories is Lucy. When I first read Narnia as a child, my attention was drawn to her simply because her position was so similar to my own. She was the youngest in her family and had a large age gap between herself and her 3 older siblings, as did I. I enjoyed these similarities and even tried imitating Lucy's appearance. My mom enjoys reminding me that I cut my hair once, what I imagined as a nice British shoulder chop, using a pair of dull crafting scissors naturally. But as I've grown up with Lucy, my admiration has only increased as I slowly recognize other more important qualities, namely her innocence, her strength, her compassion, and most of all, her devotion to Aslan, the lion who was the allegorical reference to God in the stories. Only now do I realize how grateful I am to Lewis for giving me such a strong character to regard as my model growing up. Because of my long history with the works of C.S. Lewis, I can think of no better way to illustrate my message to you than through one of his stories, Prince Caspian. Perhaps I'm finally beginning to understand what Lewis meant when in his introduction to The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, he wrote, "Someday you'll be old enough to start reading fairy tales again." For those unfamiliar with Prince Caspian, the 4 Pevensey children are called to Narnia once again to help the young Caspian regain his rightful role as king from his tyrant uncle Miraz. The scene I would like to call to mind takes place during the children's journey to meet Caspian. Along the way, the children become lost and struggle to find their path, when suddenly Lucy believes she sees Aslan, directing the children which way to go. However, no one else sees the lion, and Lucy cannot convince them to follow his direction. She eventually gives up and dejectedly follows her older siblings along their own path. This begs the question, what enables Lucy alone to catch sight of Aslan? She was traveling along the same path as her siblings. What makes her position any different? The answer to this question is of the greatest importance, for how are we supposed to do the will of the Lord if we, just as Lucy's older siblings, are unable to find him? The Apostle Paul hints at the answer to this in his first letter to the Corinthians, quote, "Whatever you do, do all to the glory of God." The reason Lucy saw Aslan, as simple as it seems, is because she was looking for him in everything that she did. Her mind was never distracted from her true purpose, which was to seek the lion. When Paul says to do all to the glory of God, I believe our education plays a large part in that all. If we view our education as pointless toil on the way to a career, we will be no better than Lucy's older siblings, distracted by their pride, attempting to find the correct path all on their own, and losing sight of their true purpose of following the lion's direction. But if we view education in a more complete way, we will find that it unlocks a new and incredible way to seek Christ. In each of the classes that we take and the materials that we study, if we are truly seeking God with Lucy's intensity, we will begin to see the facets of God's nature reflected in everything we examine. Every time we recognize the beauty of a poem, the elegance of a mathematical proof, or the complexity of relativity, we are really catching a glimmering shadow of God's beauty, God's elegance, and God's complexity. When we seek the Lord with purpose, our education can act as a mirror, reflecting aspects of God which otherwise we never could have recognized. If we brandish our education in this manner, it can become more powerful than we could have ever imagined. This is no unfounded conjecture. It was through a very similar method of thought that brought C.S. Lewis himself to abandon his atheism and convert to Christianity. In his autobiographical work, Surprised by Joy, he explains that even as a child, he was fascinated by the feeling that would occasionally overcome him when deep in his studies or listening to a striking piece of music. He came to classify this feeling as joy and devoted his whole life to seeking joy. His life completely changed when he realized that it was not just the earthly things around him that caused his joy, but the reflection of something far greater, the glory of God. It was not joy itself that he should be seeking, but Christ. Earthly joy is a signpost pointing towards God himself. This is how we can harness our education. I am sure we have all felt this joy which Lewis describes at some point during our time at Trinity. I remember being filled with emotion upon finishing the Iliad and witnessing the embrace between Achilles and Priam. If only I had then recognized that the depth of the forgiveness and compassion displayed by these characters was powerful only because they reflected the perfect forgiveness and compassion of God. So how do we seek the Lord as Lucy does? By seeking him in everything, especially through the gift of our education. However, seeking the Lord is only half of the battle. Following him is an entirely different matter. Let us continue the story from Prince Caspian. After Lucy catches a glimpse of Aslan that first time, she hears him calling to her once again in the middle of the night, and she goes to meet him. She is overjoyed when at last she encounters him face to face, but senses that something is amiss. Although Aslan says few words, Lucy recalls all the recent events. "Yes, wasn't it a shame?" she tells Aslan. "I saw you all right. They wouldn't believe me." Lucy tries to justify herself, but Aslan just looks at her quietly. "But it wasn't my fault anyway, was it?" Aslan looks straight into her eyes. "Oh, Aslan, you don't mean it was. How could I? I couldn't have left the others and come up to you alone. How could I? Don't look at me like that." Here Lucy begins to realize the great and terrible responsibility she really has. Aslan does expect her to follow him, no matter what the situation. He instructs her again, saying, "Now, child, I will wait here. Go and wake the others and tell them to follow. If they will not, then you at least must follow me alone." Even after we find Christ in our lives, we must then perform the difficult task of following him. Aslan expects her to set the example of a faithful follower, despite the fact that she is practically a child. How could God possibly ask this of such a little girl? To lead her unwilling older siblings? And worst of all, if they do not believe her, leave her family, quite literally leave everything, to come and follow him. There is no alternate interpretation, no exaggeration in his command. How could God ask this of a little girl? How can he ask this of me? Of you? The challenge Lucy faces is quite similar to our own as Trinity graduates. At Trinity, we have been given the gift of growing together in a strong community where we support each other, challenge each other, and push each other to become the best versions of ourselves. Over the last 6 years, we have learned to stand together, united in our task of pursuing the true, the beautiful, and the good, and deepening our relationships with Christ. And now it is time for us to go out into the world, but the world is not necessarily oriented by these values and could easily dismiss us because of our youth. But remember Paul's words to Timothy, quote, "Do not let anyone look down on you because you are young. but be an example for other believers in your speech, behavior, love, faithfulness, and purity. There's so many in our society today who desperately desire a purposeful life, dedicated to truth and goodness, but are unaware of the answers which Christianity offers. C.S. Lewis himself was once in such a state, before his ultimate realization that joy's true origin was found in Christ. He was left to wander down many false paths, all leading to dead ends. He recognized the truth and beauty around him and desperately sought joy itself, but no matter where he looked, he could not find the substance and purpose he desired. This repeated discouragement caused him even to doubt the real existence of joy, and he became in danger of disenchantment. It was only through his friendship with J.R.R. Tolkien and their discussions about Christianity that he was saved from disbelief. Tolkien played a large part in bringing Lewis to the conversion, which finally allowed him to experience true fulfillment and happiness in God, instead of half-empty promises of happiness found in earthly reflections. We have the opportunity to become Tolkien's in others' lives. Lucy gives us one model of such ministry. She guides her siblings away from their dangerous path contrary to Aslan's command. She opens their eyes to their stubbornness and directs them towards Aslan. A different model can be found in Alyosha Karamazov and his interactions with Grushenka. When others only acknowledged her faults, Alyosha alone recognized the good that was within Grushenka. Unlike Lucy's siblings, both Grushenka and Alyosha were aware of their own faults, but through their shared support, each found the freedom to move towards the good together. We can be the ones who reach out the hand of companionship and together follow the Lord. Unfortunately, this can put us in a very vulnerable position. Not only can our invitation of union with Christ be rejected, there are also those who are hostile towards the worship of God. The Jews of the Old and New Testament faced challenges such as idolatry, persecution, and infidelity. We still face these same issues today, sometimes just in disguise. Christians are mocked for their faith. Although there are far more serious examples of Christian persecution, I am only here referring to the ones we have personally faced. The snickers you hear when you alone show reverence to Christ, or the mocking questions about your Christianity. But that does not mean we must close ourselves off to the world, nor must we follow this example and stray from the true path as Lucy did the first time in following her siblings. On the contrary, our education has not only instilled in us the ability to seek Christ in a personal manner, but has given us the tools to become highly educated and sophisticated individuals who will be strong advocates for the faith. Although most of our short 18 years have been spent in the comfort of our homes and the support of our community here, we have spent the last 6 years fortifying our resolve with models of outstanding heroism and leadership. We have seen the steadfastness of Patroklos, the selflessness of Sidney Carton, the integrity of Atticus, and so many more. The determination and resolve of these characters is brought to life in a song called Jerusalem, which the chamber singers had the pleasure of performing this year. The lyrics of this song are taken from a poem by William Blake. Bring me my bow of burning gold. Bring me my arrows of desire. Bring me my spear, O clouds unfold. Bring me my chariot of fire. I will not cease from mental fight, nor let my sword sleep in my hand, till we have built Jerusalem. This is our calling, to follow the Lord and to build the kingdom of God on earth. But even with this call ringing in our ears, our doubt sings a different tune and again fills us with fear. The fear that Thomas More faced when he knew he must confront the king. The fear that caused Alyosha to run to the monastery and escape the horrors of his Karamazov relations. It was this fear that filled Lucy when she finally understood Aslan's expectation of her. We have both a curse and a blessing. We know how to seek the truth and are given the task of finding it. We have the ability to make a difference, so we are given the responsibility to do so. But our own fears fill us with doubt, reminding us that we are only human and have no chance of ever achieving the lofty and unattainable feats with which God burdens us. But whenever I'm afflicted with these doubts and am in sight of losing all hope, I remember Lucy's beautiful response to Aslan's command. She says, "And I wouldn't have been alone. I know, not if I was with you." This is our secret. We are not alone. In all of the hardships we will face, Christ will accompany us every step of the way. Yes, we will be challenged, but if we seek God in every way that we can and follow him in everything that we do, he will extend his hand toward us and he will support us along our way. I would like to close with my favorite verse, with which many of you may be familiar. "Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." Or, in the words of C.S. Lewis, "Courage, dear heart." Thank you.